Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How you doing this morning?
Good. How are you doing?
All right. I've been smoky outside again.
Is it smoky? I couldn't.
Yeah, another air quality warning today.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, but such is life.
Where's the fire?
That's a good question. All over seems to be my impression, but I haven't heard of any sort of real specific, hotspot, so to speak. But
yeah, I was at Miat Hot Springs.
Oh yeah.
About two weeks ago. That's the one corner of the park, Jasper Park, that's opened up.
Okay.
And it was sure nice to go there. Such a fantastic place to visit. Alrighty, Bruce. It's been a funny summer, painful summer, excellent summer for the Edmonton Oilers. A very strange summer, and it's one of the consequences of that is our prospect series, which was backed up quite a bit. Like we spend August talking on the podcast about prospects. But this August, we've spent talking about Leon Draisaitl's contract and Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway's offer sheets. So today, though, we're going to get into the prospects. I think we're going to be talking about the top 12 is where we left off. I think we left off at Matvei Petrov, number 13 in our prospect countdown. So we're going to be talking about the top 12. But to kick it off, we'll just talk briefly, Bruce. The Oilers are still possibly in the hunt for a right shot defenseman. They seem to be focused, from the names being mentioned, on someone who can move the puck, which I actually think is a good idea. That being a pretty major skill to have on your NHL team on the blue line. And with the idea that Darnell Nurse is probably best paired with a puck mover, as opposed to a more defensive defenseman, say Cody Ceci or Vincent Desharnais, who both struggled, had dramatic struggles along with Nurse in pairings last year. So I think the thinking in the Oilers is better put him with somebody who can skate and move the puck, which is why they were looking at, which is why they had Philip Broberg there in the Stanley Cup Finals. And without him, painfully so, we're going to be looking at who knows who, because they have the main candidates right now, Bruce. Ty Emberson, and we'll start here just looking at the main candidates. Ty Emberson, Josh Brown, Troy Stetcher, maybe Connor Carrick, or Connor Carrick.
Carrick, yeah.
Anyone else that I miss? Ben Gleason's the left side guy, right? So
yeah. Well, one we're going to be talking about when we go through the prospects, actually two right shot D-men, or three right shot D-men we're going to be talking about, but really one that's kind of in the immediate mix.
Bill Kemp.
Yeah.
Why don't you pick up? We've talked about Ty Emberson, I think, in the wake of the Broberg trade. But if there was one other guy who you think has a shot there, what would be your guy of the other guys? And it can be Kemp. I mean, we can talk about him now.
Right. Besides Stetcher?
Well, you can talk if it's Stetcher. Besides Emberson, who we've talked about.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think Stetcher is a lock to be on the team, and I'm not sure that he can handle the second pairing. It's the question. I mean, he kind of lines up as being a third pairing guy. In his career, he's averaged about 18 minutes, which is strong third pairing. But he's never once averaged 20 minutes a game in the NHL, which is kind of the it kind of defines top four in my experience. Whereas the guy who left, Cody Ceci, he was plus 20 minutes all 3 years he was in Edmonton, and basically about the last 9 years in a row, other than the 1 year in Pittsburgh, he was a little below that figure, and otherwise he always seemed to be at that magical 20-minute mark. So that's what you're trying to replace here, and you're trying to replace it with a bunch of guys that generally are in the teens. Stetcher last year in just 7 games with Edmonton averaged 16 minutes. So clearly third pairing on this team when he was in there, and actually he was essentially the number 7 who got the occasional chance here and there. When Ekholm got sick, or when they had down the stretch, they had some healthy scratches. Towards the end of the season, he got some games in there, and of course, then he never played at all in the playoffs. But
what do you think of him, Bruce? What did you think of him when you saw him in Edmonton?
Well, I actually attended his first game when the game Ekholm was sick, and he wound up playing left defense, the right shot playing left defense, which is a very rare sight in this town. And I thought maybe was a bridge too far for him. Like making your debut is one thing, but doing so on in unfamiliar position. And I didn't think he had a great game that particular night. But I like him as a player. I liked him when he was in Vancouver, and that's saying a lot because you already got 1 strike against you if you're a Canuck. But he's a small guy. He's a weird skater. Like he has a real funny skating style, and people assume just because of his stature and everything that he's a great puck mover. And to me, he's a pretty good puck mover, but I wouldn't say anything exceptional. He's a real feisty guy, though. Like, he doesn't back down, and he doesn't shy away from a challenge. Like, he'll take a hit to make a play. But he's like 5'10", 184 pounds, right? He's like Chris Russell size guy. And so is that a guy that's going to play 20 minutes a night? Maybe not. Is it a guy that's going to look okay beside Darnell Nurse? Maybe. I mean, a lot of the pressure here lands directly on the shoulders of Nurse himself to pick up his game and lead his pairing, and he had his struggles last year, to say the least. And Stetcher, like, offensively, he averages like under 20 points per 82 games, so he's not like he's going to pile in the points. He just isn't. He's just sort of a guy that wins pucks, moves pucks, tries to get it going in the right direction. And I would be a lot more comfortable with him on the third pair than the second, would be my ultimate conclusion.
I was really underwhelmed by Stetcher when he came here to Edmonton, Bruce, this last time. I was expecting more. But I note that he didn't play in the playoffs.
Right, because of injury.
And he was, I don't think he got injured. I think he came injured.
Yep.
And they were hoping he could fight through it. Because I had much better memories of Troy Stetcher as a player than what I saw in Edmonton. I thought he was more, I thought we were getting kind of a Jordan Osterley. Remember Jordan Osterley?
I sure do.
Fast, puck moving kind of player. I wonder where Jordan Osterley is right now. How old is he? 32.
Mm-hmm.
Played last year, 22 games with the Flames.
Yep.
Anyway, he was fast and could move the puck. That was Jordan Osterley, and that's how I remember Troy Stetcher. I didn't see a fast player or anything close to that. I thought he looked kind of slow, and so was it a foot injury? I can't.
He had a cyst in his ankle.
Yeah,
and it became infected, and they wound up having to do a surgery on it that took him out of the rotation during the playoffs. But he was always Broberg stepped ahead of him on the depth chart as a 7th D man, and he was never really a factor. So they finally said, "Let's get this done so you're ready for next year." And he didn't have a contract at that point. I was kind of surprised that Oilers brought him back, but I'm not sad they did. I thought that was a pretty crafty signing 2 years at 787. Like, it's barely NHL minimum with a tiny. I think he's 25,000 over the minimum in the second year of the contract, and that's good depth to have at
It really is.
a really good price. And that actually might help him. He's going to be battling with, among other things, Josh Brown for position. Brown got a 3-year deal, but at $1 million. And you just know that the organization would rather go with the guy that's, even if they're not like right up to the cap, they get a cheaper player, $212,000 less. And they're using that gap to create cap space for a trade at the deadline. So I think Stetcher's got the inside track, and if it comes down to a battle between those two players, as it very well might.
So Ty Emberson is the guy who's, and we've talked about him on previous podcasts. We won't again. So he's he's going to get the first shot at partnering with Nurse. He's more of a defensive defenseman, played under Knobloch, lots of good reports.
Yep.
So I see now why I didn't understand why the Oilers had brought him back, but because I think the news came about his cyst. Maybe not. Maybe that came out first. Anyway, because of that injury, I'm just forgetting what I saw. I'm not putting any weight in what I saw of Stetcher. Players playing injured are a shadow, generally speaking, a shadow of themselves. And I think that's what we saw was a shadow of Troy Stetcher. And I'm hopeful that maybe you just never know. Like, I always thought he was a pretty good player in my glimpses of him in Vancouver. And maybe he could be that. Maybe he is a guy who could play with Nurse for a while. In saying that, Bruce, there's some seriously dark decade of darkness plus overtones to this entire conversation. Kind of the hope that we have for any of these guys stepping up and getting this job done is the equivalent to the hope that we had with like Curtis Foster, Cam Barker, Nikita Nikitin, Mark Fane, just this endless list, Adam Clendening, of players that came in as defensemen in that era, and they just weren't even close. The advantage, the players coming in to play second and third pairing right D on the Oilers have is this team can bring out the best in players. You don't have to be playing over your head, generally speaking. But the guy who is being asked to play fourth defense or second pairing defense with Darnell Nurse is being asked to play over his head, and he's asked to play with a player who didn't hold up anyone last year, who was an anchor for many of the players he played with in Nurse because of his erratic play. So this is a real worry. And I think I agree with you that I think it's Emberson and then likely Stetcher. Josh Brown, I don't know much about. Like I remember him from the OHL actually. I watched him in some games, and I remember him a little bit from playing in, I think, Arizona. But I don't know much about him. Like where he ranks compared to Vinny Desharnais as a player, I can't say. So I'm not going to hazard a guess. So they did invest a lot of money in the guy, and we also know that teams, generally speaking, teams with big defenses win in the playoffs in the NHL. So you could see the Oilers thinking we want to give this guy a really good look because he's a great big guy. He's tough. This is a team that's doesn't have, especially if Kane's out for a while, Evander Kane's out for a while, doesn't have a lot of toughness necessarily. So I could see Josh Brown also getting that third pairing job with Kulak, and then there's Kemp, and we might as well just talk about him now, Bruce, in this context because he's I think he's number 11. So number 12 on our countdown is Shane LaChance. We'll just get to him in a moment, but let's talk about Kemp now. He's been in the Oilers system. He's the William Lagesson of Oilers prospects now. William, I don't know if has he broken William Lagesson's record, Bruce?
He's gotten right near the maximum. Like, this was his 8th year on our prospects list. And you'll remember that in 2020, we actually did the list twice. So we ranked this guy 9 times. And he's gradually moved from 32nd, 19th, 18th, 16th, 20th, 19th. Last year he got to 12th. This year to 11th. So he's moving up, but I mean, he's never ever even made it into the top 10. On the other hand, he's an enduring fellow that's still with the team after all these years. Usually guys like that have bounced around to a couple of different orgs by now. This is last chance Texaco, as my friend Lowtide likes to put it, with he will be a Group 6 free agent at the end of this year, unless he plays 79 NHL games this year to get to 80. Right? That's the cutoff for Group 6 free
So
agents.
if he makes the team as third pairing defenseman, sign him to a 2-year deal at once. In other words.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean he's got his pact is coming up at the end of this year, and you'd have to think that from his point of view, if he's still not there, that he will be looking elsewhere next year, and that the team will also be looking elsewhere. So at the same time, I kind of like this player and always have. He's a solid defensive defenseman. He's good in his own end. He's smart with the puck. He's good positionally. He's got a rugged edge to his game. Everything you like about stay-at-home blue liners, with the one issue always having been skating. And defensemen who can't skate, they could play in the NHL for many, many years, but I think we're probably past that point now where you have a minus skater. And I know he's working on it and gradually getting better. Like when I saw him at his first development camp years ago, and I saw him, a guy went wide on him, and he just the way he pivoted and turned, I thought, ooh, I don't know about this guy. And yet he's he was in the U.S. development team program. He was captain there. He's widely regarded for leadership.
Captain at Yale.
He's got lots of check marks on his list, and a couple of the COVID thing. Almost everybody on our prospects list that's been around for a while was affected by that. He was going to be captain at Yale, and Yale canceled their whole season, so he wound up going to Sweden, of all places, and did time there. And then he came, the Oilers signed him. I always thought after his fourth year he would probably just do the John Marino and not sign, but the Oilers signed him so that he could play somewhere in that COVID year, and he stuck it out with the team. And I know the minor league coaches think very highly of him.
Here's what
I think he's got a shot, but it's an edge, kind of from the edge.
So he was drafted in the 7th round, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
So he's which is they've gotten a lot of good players in the 7th.
Yes, they have. D-men particularly.
Yeah, John Marino, Vinny DeHarnay, Michael Kesselring. They've done very well in recent years. And Maximus Wanner, who we're going to be talking about later.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so here's what Ira Cooper, special correspondent to the Cult of Hockey. He did the Kemp profile. Here's what he said about Kemp. Quote, Kemp is a perfect stylistic fit for the Oilers' third pairing. A tough and hard-nosed defender who can also help move the puck out of the zone. The reader likely asks why he's never really in the conversation, and the answer is easy and obvious. One word, skating. And as an aside, Bruce, when you brought up his getting blown away it reminded me of Ziet Paigan, who was this Russian defenseman. He was really high on our prospect list a couple years, and he did very well in the KHL. But he came up, and in a couple of games, he just got walked, Paigan, and there was just no way he had the speed to play the North American game. Ira continues, quote, skating has never been Kemp's strong suit, and has rightfully been considered quite poor since his pre-draft days through to today. Of course, Kemp has improved his skating year over year, but it remains far from a strength. There are real questions regarding whether he can move laterally enough, edge and pivot to defend rushes and defend in zone against quick and mobile forwards at the NHL level. If he can, I think this player can be a strong right D. If he can't, well, sail on, Phil Kemp. Mm-hmm. My impression of Kemp comes from watching him in Sweden, which is a few years ago. I haven't watched him in recent years, but I was like, I think he would have been like a lot of players, especially when you're trying to break in at that bottom edge and you've got size. And this might have changed because apparently takes the odd fight for his teammates. But if he had been more physical, if he had that added physical edge, I think that would help him. And maybe he's got that in more recent years. Maybe he's up that physical component of his game. He did seem like a really smart player and fairly good with the puck, making good decisions on the ice, solid positionally. I mean, it's funny because William Lagesson isn't a bad comparison at all.
Right. No, he's pretty good, actually.
And similar kind of player. Now, Lagesson might be a bit better skater and might be a bit more physical than Kemp. But Kemp may have some attributes over Lagesson. Maybe Kemp is a bit better positionally and bit better reading the game. So he has got a chance. But he'd be after Emberson, Stetcher, and Brown. Then it would be Kemp on the list. So they don't seem so. In terms, go ahead.
I was just going to say, he's raised his game. He's led the Condors in plus the last 2 years. And he was always one of those guys that I thought, whatever level he gets to, he's going to be a solid player there. I'm not sure it's going to be the NHL. And I've seen really nothing to change my mind. He's an excellent AHL defender. And he will help Bakersfield. That's presumably where he starts this year. And will... I'm certain he'll clear waivers because he'll be part of the sort of the Cambrian extinction event that goes on at the beginning of October every year, where just masses of guys clear through the league all at once. He'll help Bakersfield. The question is, will there be an injury? Will there be something that pushes him up here? And how will he take that chance? Last year he was up, he got called up, and he got his only game when someone was sick or unavailable to go up front, and they were literally down to their last player. So they put him in. He played 3 shifts as a forward, of all things, a stay-at-home D-man, got his NHL shot as playing right wing in a game where, if it had been Jay Woodcroft, he would have used him on defense and he would have gone with 7D, but it wasn't Jay Woodcroft, and they just said, well, we've got our 6D, we'll use him as a 12th forward. So really kind of ironic in terms of when he finally did get his chance that it wasn't doing what he does.
The last thing was the Oilers could still bring in another pro player. And they've talked about players like Tyson Barrie, who's now signed in Calgary. Did Barrie sign a contract or a PTO?
PTO.
Talked about Kevin Shattenkirk, which is really funny because I remember rumors in about 2017 or 2018 about Shattenkirk coming here, about the Oilers wanting to get Shattenkirk and Shattenkirk not wanting to come here. But Elliot Friedman now reports there's lots of players who didn't want to play in Edmonton before who are now very interested. Shattenkirk, I think, is 35, and he's one of the players I haven't watched closely in recent years, so I can't really offer an opinion. His even strength point scoring was okay last year. I did see Justin Schultz play last year, and I thought he was okay. He's also been talked about, and it's interesting. He had a really rocky exit from Edmonton. A huge vocal fan base turned against him at the arena, which is always kind of a sad thing. It's a painful thing to see. I really liked the player, but he started to make major mistakes and lost his confidence, was moved out of town for pretty much a 3rd or 4th round draft pick, as I recall, and went to Pittsburgh and won 2 Stanley Cups where he was a significant contributor. I like the idea of Justin Schultz. I hope he, of the names mentioned, the other one was Tony DeAngelo, who's a lot younger than the group of defensemen, Barrie, Schultz, and Shattenkirk. He's 28 or 29, DeAngelo. And he's just a year, he had a weak year last season, but he's a year away from being a 40-point player in the NHL, still in his hockey prime. But apparently, I think it was Kurt who someone mentioned that it looks like they've moved on from D'Angelo as a possibility. So doesn't sound like that's going to happen. But Schultz might happen. He's a big, tall guy, moves the puck. He's kind of like Evan Bouchard light at this point, real light. Similar stylistic kind of hockey players, similar problems perhaps with some nonchalance now and then on defense. But I like the idea of Justin Schultz. I'd be happy to see him get a tryout. And he was a better player than Troy Stetcher was. Mm-hmm. He's also older though.
34.
Yeah, he's 34. So he was never. I don't know about his injury status, but finesse defensemen who can skate well can play at 34 in the NHL, usually or often. Mm-hmm. So that his age doesn't worry me a ton. So if they brought him in as competition, I would see that as a positive. What's your thought on the
Schultz and Shattenkirk are, Schultz last year played 16 and a half minutes a night with Seattle, so clear third pairing. Yeah. Minus 23. Yeah. He had 26 points in 70 games. But he had more assists on the power play than he did at even strength, just 9. And the power play in Edmonton, I don't see it.
He's not playing on the power play.
Right. So he looks like a guy who's near the end of the line. And frankly, so does Shattenkirk, who last year played under 16 minutes a night after basically being 19 plus throughout his career. He managed to 24 points in Boston, but minus 2 on a very good team. And the games that I saw him play in that I noticed him, he didn't stand out as being particularly special. And the funny thing about him is, you mentioned he wasn't interested in coming to Edmonton. He wasn't interested in coming to Canada. Shattenkirk, right? He was born in New York, and he just always wanted to be in the States. And there he's been in the States: St. Louis, Anaheim, New York Rangers, Colorado, Washington, Tampa Bay, Boston. That's his. He's a journeyman. But all that journey has been in the south of the 49th. But I guess beggars can't be choosers. And if you're, looking for a job and there's a team out there looking for a right shot that also happens to be a Stanley Cup contender, I guess he's going to say, pick me. But I'm a little skeptical on both guys.
Fair enough. Like I say, this whole conversation has Decade of Darkness overtones, and we should be skeptical about all these players. The only one that I have real hope for, I have some hope that Stetcher will be different, but Emberson, obviously, he's a young player who is he's at that age where sometimes defensemen just pop up and become a top 4 D-man and hold that job for 4 or 5 years in the NHL, and guys you never heard of, and he has that vibe. He's got, and I'm just saying this, never having seen him play, he's got that vibe about him that he could be that guy. So that's the best chance. And Kurt Levins has written about the best thing for the Oilers to do is you got to wait. They don't have a lot of cap space. They're going to wait till the trade deadline and make their move then. They don't have a lot of capital to make a move, so it's going to be difficult. But like Vancouver picked up Zadorov last year for a 3rd-round draft pick, as I recall. So if the Oilers can get the cap space, if they can figure out how to get some cap space going, enough to take on a $3-4 million a year deal, you could see maybe a Zadorov kind of deal coming up. That would be ideal, of course, to get a player like that. That was what a great move by Vancouver last year. And that's what they have to try to replicate, the Oilers, this year. And it's probably going to come in no earlier than December, January, probably in February.
Right. Yeah, the longer the wait, the more they, have a chance to try out their other options. But also, it's that equation of, as you get deeper into the season with fewer days left on the schedule to pay guys, you can actually afford to use your cap space to get a little higher priced player as you go deep. I mean, last year the Oilers took it right to the deadline before cashing that in, and that wouldn't surprise me if they do that again.
Bruce, let's talk about now the number 12 prospect, Shane LaChance. And we talked previously on a podcast about how the Oilers had a lot of forwards at the top end of the prospect pool who didn't do well. So Xavier Bourgault, Ty Tullio, Carter Savoy, and Matvei Petrov. Petrov's a bigger guy, but one of the things those players had in common, they were smaller players. LaChance is from a different school. He is a big guy. And sometimes it's hard to tell from hockey DB or like how big a prospect is. Like you get so he's variously talked about as being 6'4", 200 pounds or 6'5", 220 pounds. Ooh. So he's between those two things. So he's in any case, yeah. So hockey DB has him at 6'5", 218. So I don't know how big he is now. Bruce, he has one of the most impeccable hockey bloodlines. His dad, Scott LaChance, was a really solid defensive defenseman with the New York Islanders for almost a decade. And his grandfather is a guy called Jack Parker, who was kind of a legendary college coach from Boston University in the United States. Like he's like the Dean Smith of, which is an old reference to a North Carolina Tar Heels basketball coach. Mandatory 1970s, 80s sports reference. He's just Mike Krzyzewski, like he's in that class when it comes to hockey coaches at the U.S. college level in the United States. He's just a legend down there. So anyway, Shane LaChance ends up at Boston University. The Oilers took him with they took him in the 6th round, 186 overall in the 2021 draft. So not at all a top prospect. Like guys taken at that level, maybe one guy in that entire round will make the NHL and become a productive player on average. It's just rare. So you're looking for something, and what the Oilers saw was two things. I think they saw three things. They saw the hockey background. So someone who might know how to work hard enough, might have a concept and be getting good advice on the things you have to do to become a pro player, which I think is really super. Should not be underestimated. Also, they saw the size, and he's also got an incredible shot that he can score from range. It's just a quick, hard shot. We'll get into that in a second. So he played a couple years in the U.S. HL. He was drafted out of Boston Junior Bruins. Sounds like I'm not sure what kind of league that is, but he played a couple years for Youngstown, and he became a decent major junior player. I guess that's their version of the major juniors in the United States is the USHL, and he 33 goals in 62 games. And then last year as a 20-year-old, he got 27 points in 40 games in Boston University as a freshman. That put Shane LaChance in serious prospect territory all of a sudden. If there's a redraft of the 2021 draft, he's not going in the 6th round. He's going in the 2nd or 3rd round based on his size. And now he did play. His numbers were possibly inflated a bit because by the end of the year, and this is to his credit, though, by the end of the year at least, he had worked his way up and was playing with Macklin. Is it Celebrini or
Celebrini?
Celebrini, not the Elvish Celebrini pronunciation.
I think it's Italian.
Yes, off C. Celebrini, Macklin Celebrini.
Celebrate.
He was. It's
got to be his goal song, surely.
Yeah. Macklin Celebrini had absolutely ripped the doors off in his first year at Boston University, and LaChance was on his wing, which immediately conjured up images in my head of 2 or 3 years from now, LaChance riding shotgun, playing on a wing in the top 6 with the Oilers. the Oilers might need then a young power forward to step up. That might have been Dylan Holloway. It's not going to be Dylan Holloway. So they're looking for that player. He's is he 21 this year? Yeah,
he's 21. Yeah, he just turned 21 here last week.
Okay, 21 last week. Fair enough. So he's an older college player. So I could see him playing at least one more year in college hockey, and then we'll see what happens then. He's like Kemp. His coaches love him. They speak really highly of him, and I think he's the captain this year at Boston University as a second year.
Oh, player. Right. Yeah, that's very rare too. It's co-captain, I think I heard.
Yeah, excuse me, co-captain. Here's what his Boston University coach Jay Pandolfo told NHL.com about this player. Quote, "He's a very intelligent player. He understands his identity as a player and what makes him successful. He's a big body. He understands how to use his size and that he needs to be strong on the puck and on the walls. He needs to make sure he gets to the net. He has a high hockey IQ where he can really play with anyone in your lineup. We saw that this year. We used him in all sorts of different roles, and toward the end, obviously found his way to play on the top line with the best player in college hockey. He really fit in nicely because he has hockey IQ to play with him." So that was some high praise. His skating is rough, though, according to the Athletic's Corey Pronman. Bruce Kurlock of Oilers Nation did a post on his shot, and he said, quote, "LaChance definitely has that one translatable skill scouts try to find in prospect. His unique ability to score from distance and from the net front really makes him a compelling prospect." And I'll end off with what Rick Tracy, the top scout for the Oilers, told NHL.com about him. Quote, "He'll stay in school, and depending on his year, we'll see. With this particular prospect, we're going year by year. With his size, skill set, and potential, we're real excited about his development path." So they've inherited this prospect, but it's good they're not, and I don't know how accurate this is. There's often talk, like when a new team takes over, new management team, that they're not too thrilled about the past prospects that are in the organization, and they don't, which I think is nuts. Like, if that's true, it could be true, but I just think good to see Tracy, at least with this prospect, say some really good things about him. And there looks like they're waiting on him, Bruce, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get promoted to get a contract this summer, an ELC contract, and be in Bakersfield next year.
Yeah, well, as for cleaning out prospects, I mean, Xavier Bourgault says hi, so does Ty Tullio, so does Jake Chason. They moved on from, so does Carter Savoy. They moved on from quite a few guys that what they had in common is that they were in Bakersfield, whereas LaChance is not. And he he's just a young guy in the weeds, draft and college, if you prefer, who's shown, I mean, he went from 11 goals to 33 in his 2 years in the USHL. That's a guy who's upwardly mobile. So again, it's going to come down to skating. Like, in some ways, he's the Phil Kemp of forwards.
Yeah, maybe a bit more rugged from the sounds of it, but Kemp doesn't back down. He just doesn't seem to initiate a lot of hard contact. Yeah, they did sweep out those players, Bruce, but you know what? Like,
I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying they did follow that blueprint of, we're going to get our guys in there and we're going to pick them and we're going to trade for them.
I'd say the departure of those players is more on them and the old management team, the current management team in Bakersfield. None of those players thrived. They all, and this for a few of them, it was their second year in Bakersfield where they had to step up. If they're going to be NHL players, you got to step up then. And if they've been moved out to make way for other players, I think that's understandable. But maybe the Oilers are going to get bit in the butt, and one of those guys are going to step up in their new situation and be a decent player. I don't even know where. Oh yeah, Tyler Tullio's in. Is he in Ottawa? Yeah, they traded him to Ottawa, I think. Bruce.
He was part of. No, he went to Buffalo. He was part of the
Buffalo.
Matt Savoy, Ryan McLeod deal. So he was the sweetener, I guess, in that deal.
I wonder if the Oilers knew if they had it. I guess they might have had an inkling they were going to lose Holloway. Maybe they just didn't. I wonder if they would have traded McLeod if they could see that Holloway was going to be moved out, because man, they've lost a lot of speed. And this isn't any kind of comment on Matt Savoy as a player or prospect. And I think that deal made sense in the context of a team with Holloway. I wonder if it makes quite as much sense without him. But anyway.
Yeah, no, Holloway seemed to be the heir apparent to the McLeod role. You know, young, fast winger, can play center, up and comer, you know, but Oilers wound up losing both guys.
All right. Jayden Grubbe.
Jaden Grubbe, yeah, I'll talk about him because I wrote
number 10
that post at number 10. And he's another guy that you can kind of file in the same group as Kemp and LaChance, in the sense that he's a big guy who does a lot of things that you like, a lot of the grunt work. Coaches love him, great leadership. He was the captain of the Red Deer Rebels for 3 years. You don't see that in junior. Very, very, even 2-year captains are a rarity in junior, let alone 3. And of course, one of the ways you get to be a captain in junior for 3 years is that you don't graduate early. You stay there for the duration. But he checks an awful lot of boxes, and apparently he checks an awful lot of opponents as well. In terms of, he's big, right-hand shot, good at face-offs, reportedly good penalty killer, plays a heavy game, goes to the tough areas. There's a whole lot of things to like about this player. The scouting report that I cited was from Elite Prospects at the time of his draft. I've been citing draft year reports of this is where they started from. If there's a defining skill here, it's Grubbe's defense. He's less aggressive and more quietly intelligent, eliminating off-puck threats, reading switch-offs, and constantly scanning and adjusting. In transition, he builds speed under the puck, pushes play to the middle, and finishes its off-puck routes to create space behind him. I love those scouting reports because they kind of do the inside baseball, like get right down in the weeds. I'm not sure they watch these guys for more than a game or two, but they tend to report on sort of inside the game stuff. And anyways, all that sounds great. Off puck routes, playing without the puck, which he projects kind of as a 4C, is sort of is the high end. But your 4C, if he's right-handed and can win face-offs and kill penalties, well, that checks 3 boxes right there, doesn't it?
And if he's rugged.
And if he's rugged, and he's he's sort of a penalty minute per game guy in junior, which they don't give out the PIMs the way they used to before they eliminated misconducts from the total. And they, I think in his case, he did it playing hard minutes and, not just sort of fighting for the hell of it to rack up the PIMs. Anyway, he was a half point per game player throughout his WHL career, which was 2 full years and then the real stub of the COVID year. And then his last year, suddenly he went 67 points in 64 games and then 16 points in 12 playoff games. And there was a real scoring element, but the Rangers didn't or couldn't or wouldn't sign him. And having drafted him at the top of the 3rd round, they traded him to Edmonton for a 5th round pick. Very fine trade for Edmonton, who at that time were dealing with the sudden and unexpected departure of Noah Philp, who checked some of those same boxes, big right shot center. projects, bottom six NHLer most likely. And so it was a pretty decent sort of recovery by Ken Holland to sort of get another player of that type, and a promising one who, he'd been drafted third round, but now he was 20 and he was ready to step right into the AHL and fill that role that Philp had the year before. And he was pretty good. He played 67 games. He only missed one game for Bakersfield. He scored 8 goals. Didn't score a lot of assists or points, like he was pushed down the lineup. And the big concern for him going forward to this year is how much more he might be pushed down the lineup, because Baco has very much improved their depth at center. Right, they got Lane Peterson back from last year. They don't have Brad Malone, who's retired. They don't have Greg McKegg, who's moved on to points unknown. But they have brought in Matt Savoy, who plays center. Noah Philp has come back. He plays center. And who is the other guy they brought in as well?
Well, we have Peterson, Savoy, Philp, and they have.
They got Hamblin back from injury. He missed the last part of the year with injury. So just like that, behind Peterson, Hamblin, Savoy, and Philp, somebody's moving to wing, and Grubbe probably projects again as the fourth line center in his second year as pro, which isn't exactly tracking for the NHL, but let's see how he does. I mean, there's something to be said for the guy playing the role that he's going to play in the event that he gets to the bigs.
I hope that he gets lots of ice time.
Yeah, me too.
This should be a priority. And what I would hope to see would be players like Peterson and Hamblin, who are further along and not really tracking as prospects anymore. Move to the wing. Go with Savoy, Philp, and Grubbe as your top 3 centers. Or at least Grubbe's playing regularly and a lot of ice time, fourth line and killing penalties. But he shouldn't be a 10-minute-a-game guy there. That would be terrible if that's what he was getting. And so, the players have got to earn their ice time and all of that stuff. But you also have to give people opportunity and to see what they have, to see if you have a future NHLer here. And he shouldn't be blocked by Peterson or Hamblin in that development. So we'll see how that develops. But what are the chances he will be blocked by one or both of those players? They're significant. So this is an ongoing tension that fans, NHL fans, like, we're all about the NHL team. And right. That is only served best by prospects developing down there, getting ice time, developing, getting better. And last year that system failed with a number of key prospects with the Oilers. Yeah. And, they've brought in Kelly Larson? Is that the guy's name?
Yes. Yep.
To be the development guy with the Oilers. And they've got to get on. They've got to figure this out, because what happened last year wasn't good. It was a major fail for the organization. Yeah. And they've got to do better. Bruce, the next guy on our list, number 9, is a very, very interesting prospect. His name is Maxim Beryozkin. I think that's how you pronounce it, but I'm not sure.
Yep, I think so too.
He is a great big Russian guy, Russian forward, who was taken in the, let me just get here in my post, taken in the 5th round, 138th overall in the 2020 NHL draft. So this would have been one of the Tyler Wright drafts. And it's interesting, Bruce, Tyler Wright has right now, it's fashionable in Edmonton to crap all over Tyler Wright and to criticize his work as the Oilers' chief amateur scout. But if a few of these guys like Berezkin, Max Wanner, LaChance, if a few of these guys pan out as NHLers, we might have to revisit that. So I think it's still too early, honestly, to, obviously didn't work out great yet, but you never know. And this guy is probably maybe the Wanner's probably the best bet. We've got him ranked the highest, but Berezkin's a real good bet. Bruce, in the KHL playoffs last year, he was the fourth highest scorer in the playoffs with 16 points in 20 games. He's 6'2", 216 pounds. He in the regular season, so he's played his way up on the Yaroslavl Lokomotiv team from being like in the year he was drafted, he played 1 game, 0 points. Next year, 31 games, 2 points. Year after that, 30 games, 2 points. So he's going nowhere fast. Then suddenly in 22-23, he gets ice time, it looks like. He gets his chance.
100%.
26 points in 52 games. Last year, 30 points in 62 games. And then in the playoffs, he's clearly one of the best players on that team, if not in the KHL playoffs. So he's going to be 23 in October, and his contract in the KHL is up in May. And don't be distracted by the playoffs. What's ever happening in the playoffs? Then Edmonton Oilers management, they should be on this player, making contact now, talking to him, and getting his name on an entry-level contract in May. Because, like, again, not having seen this player, I'm just going by statistics, but he's a big guy. Let me just read a few comments of what the scouts have to say about him. Here's what August 2023. Here's Corey Pronman, and this is after his first big breakout season in the KHL. Corey Pronman of The Athletic, quote, Berezkin is a big, powerful winger with very good puck skills and a good shot as well. His skating is just okay, though, and that may limit him at the NHL level. Man, are we hearing that skating is just okay thing a lot on these prospects right now? Here's what Scott Wheeler said in February.
Does lots of things right, can't skate.
February 2024, Scott Wheeler of The Athletic, quote, despite being a really bulky, heavy-set guy, he actually doesn't play as you might expect either. He's not the driven, shot-first, physical, powerful skating player that a Holloway or a Schaefer was when they picked him. Instead, he plays more of a puck protection game that tries to utilize his size and length to keep players on his hip and facilitate or take pucks from the wall to shooting areas. When he said that, I suddenly conjured up a version of Dustin Penner as a young Russian forward. And Penner was a bit bigger, but if this kind of player can make his mark, it's like LaChance, it's like Kemp, it's like Grubbe. Like, there's ways for players to make the NHL without being a blazing fast skater. And we'll see with this guy. He sounds like he's really good with the puck, really smart offensive hockey player. And go ahead.
It's also possible to succeed as an big NHL forward without being a masher. Like, there's kind of, the alpha power forward view that people have. You went back to Dustin Penner. Me being so much older than you, I immediately when I read that review, went back to Mike Krushelnyski, who took a lot of heat because he didn't hit a lot. But what he did was he made smart plays with the puck, and he used his body to shelter the puck and make his plays. I mean, we see Draisaitl do a lot of that nowadays. I'm not saying Beryozkin is that guy, but that, using there's different ways even to use your big size to advantage. And I actually found that scouting report helpful and not really discouraging at all.
He sounds like an interesting player. So hopefully they can get him signed up next. And it's great because the Oilers, they're going to need some help next year. And there's a chance he might be ready to go in the NHL. He's at that age. He might not need much AHL time at all, if any. And the Oilers might be in need of some players because they're going to start being, if they're hard up against the cap now, Bruce, it doesn't get any easier in the years to come when with Draisaitl, Bouchard, and McDavid contracts getting significant raises. Fingers crossed on McDavid. Bruce, next on our list, Olivier Rodrigue, another guy who has been an Oilers prospect for a long time. He was drafted in the 2018 draft, second round, 62nd overall. And he played 4 years in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. He statistically trended up as a major junior player. COVID year, he goes over and plays in Austria for 23 games and then ends up in Bakersfield. He actually played 34 games that year, so he wasn't as impacted as much as some. Bruce, in the AHL the last couple of years especially, he's been really good. He's a smaller player, 6'1", 160 pounds. For a goalie, that's pretty small. It's the exception in the NHL. There are some notable exceptions, though, for smaller goalies. And his AHL save percentage in the last year has been outstanding, better than a lot of highly rated prospects, including Yaroslav Askarov, who was just picked up by San Jose. Askarov is younger, of course, so you have to factor that in. But this guy's really done well defensively for the Bakersfield Condors the last just in nets. He's just been super solid, it looks like.
Yeah, he played his way down to 22nd on our list just 2 years ago after kind of having a mediocre second pro year. And then he just picked it up significantly after in years 3 and 4 as a Condor. You know, his save percentage jumped up to 912, 916 after 2 years below 900. And also, you know, he's got more and more games where, you know, he played 37 games last year and essentially was the number one, or, you know, he and Campbell. But he got more ice time in Bakersfield than Campbell did, and put up some pretty solid numbers, to say the least. Now, he's now at the stage where he's played his ELC +1. Like, goalies get an extra year where they're waiver exempt. Well, he's used all of that now, so he's at risk of getting waived at the end of camp and being picked up. Now, like I say, most of those guys clear through that, but every once in a while you hear of it, especially a goalie getting nabbed at that particular time. And I guess that's the chance that, you know, a lot of teams take. I mean, the Oilers did lose a pretty good number 3 goalie in the waiver wire at the end of camp when they had Anton Forsberg. Thought they had that number 3 position, and he's wound up being a number 1 goalie in the NHL. But that's a risk they're going to have to take. I'm almost certain they're going to have Pickard starting the season at number 2 and Skinner at number 1. And so they're just going to have to take that chance. And but Rodrigue, you know, he does have a pretty decent resume, and you know, and he's building it, and he's certainly the top prospect goalie in the organization at this point in time, with only Emil Vinny really in the conversation in terms of having a, you know, a resume that suggests he might ultimately be a, you know, a big league goalie. The other guys they got are kind of spinning their wheels, guys like Samuel Janssen and Nathan Day, yeah. So
they did sign that young guy. Is it Connor Unger?
Connor Unger, yeah. As a free agent, and
he'll be in the ECHL. It looks like this year, Connor Unger. I'm guessing because Rodrigue is certain. Like they signed Colin Delia, who's kind of a veteran, but I think he'll be the backup goalie in the AHL. And Rodrigue will be the clear starter. He'll get a lot of games.
100%.
Yeah, a lot of games. If he's not, there is a non-zero chance he will be taken on waivers, though. If there's a team, you know, you just look at all the goalies being sent down. Is he the best one who's going to get sent down? He'll be in the running for that. So there's a chance. Not a good one. Like I would say, it's like 1 in 10, 1 in 5, somewhere like that he would get taken. But there is a chance. Bruce, next up on our list is
Raphael Lavoie, number 7 prospect.
Lavoie. Yeah.
Yeah, another big, strong forward. Not sure skating is an issue, but I'm not sure it's a real strength of this player. He's a shoot first, ask questions later guy who's known for his quick release and powerful shot, and he's in fact put up a number of 20-goal seasons playing for various places since they drafted him. He scored 32 for Halifax in 2018-19. He was a second-round pick in 2018. And then he scored 20 in the playoffs for Halifax that year. The following year, he got 38 in the Q. Year after that, in hockey, Allsvenskan during the pandemic, 23 goals, 45 points in the second-tier Swedish league as a rookie pro. And after one indifferent season in Bakersfield, the last 2 years he's had 25 and 28 goals. I mean, 28 goals doesn't sound like a huge number. Well, in the AHL, that's a lot of goals. He came 10th in the league in goals in the AHL, and that's playing in the Pacific Division where they actually play fewer games than other divisions around the league. So a significant handicap if you want to win the scoring championship. But, he ranked pretty well on that front, 50 points. He's got a little bit of grit in his game, 64 PIMs last year, and just a little bit of, I don't want to call it crazy, but every once in a while he'll go off the deep end a little bit. So he's kind of a stochastic toughness that he brings to the lineup that, you're never quite sure. And that keeps opponents guessing a little bit. But last year he played 7 games in the NHL, and I'm sorry to say that he really did very little in those games, and he didn't get a lot of ice time, but, he just wasn't doing much. And it was a little bit catch-22, but he only played 51 minutes in 7 games. So no points, and I think 4 shots on net, which is his forte. And mind you, playing 7 minutes on the fourth line, you're probably not going to get a lot of opportunities. And he didn't, but he just didn't really move the needle. He got called up when Connor Brown got hurt, and then when Brown was ready to come back, he went back down, and he only got 1 game after that when Evander Kane missed a game in Los Angeles after Christmas. He stepped in, he looked all right in that game in his sort of second call-up, but right after the game, he was back down, and he never came back. So he's now among the most mature prospect forwards in the system, and he did survive that Bakersfield purge of all the wingers that seemed to be moved along elsewhere. He's signed to another contract, and looks again like his sort of last real chance. But if Evander Kane, that might be his ticket. If he's still banged up in training camp, I mean, it sounds like he might not be ready to start the season. And if he isn't, and Lavoie is in a small bunch of guys like Roby Jarventie, who you're going to talk about next, and also I guess Matt Savoy and certainly Vasily Podkolzin that they traded for, that are in the mix for essentially third or fourth line left wing, or even extra forward, but on the roster. And I suggest Podkolzin, though, certainly is going to be on the roster, and so that opportunity may be pretty narrow for a guy like Lavoie. But I'd suggest he's probably, even though he isn't ahead in our prospects list of Jarventie, he's probably ahead of him in terms of the depth chart right now, in terms of being closer to NHL ready and older, more mature prospect.
For this year, definitely, because Jarventie's coming off knee surgery, and I think that's the main factor that would hold him back. Bruce, if you look at the last 2 teams that won the Cup, Florida and Vegas, their fourth lines were populated by big, aggressive, hard-hitting players. And if Lavoie if Lavoie wants to be an NHL player, he's got to be that player. And I don't think it. So he got a second opinion on his ability from 31 other NHL teams last year who said, no, we're not taking you on waivers. We don't see it. Yeah. We don't see an NHL player there. And I don't know how he took that, but to me, the message had to be, brother, you've got to play a physical hockey game if you're going to make the NHL. Mm-hmm. You've got to get out there and hit. You're a big, strong guy. And mm-hmm. if you have any hope of making the NHL, you have got to hit every shift. You've got to take the body. And this is why his 7 games in the NHL last year was so baffling and disappointing, because of his I mean, it's easier said than done, obviously, being that player goes out there and hits. You got to be in position to do it. You've got to be, mentally, physically tough to do it. It's a tough grind to play that game. But he has those players on the fourth lines in Florida and Las Vegas don't have more talent than Raphael Lavoie. He's got some talent. He's got a hard shot, and he can take the puck to the net hard. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there is a possibility of an NHL player there, but it's all about his mindset, about his role on the team, and he's highly unlikely to make it as a top 9 forward in the NHL at this point. But he has a chance to grab hold of a fourth line job in Edmonton this year. And it's not a great chance, but there can with Kane being injured, there can always be other injuries. Podkolzin, though, from what I've seen of Podkolzin in Vancouver, I think he has got it through his head what Lavoie needs to grab. I think Podkolzin is ready to be that big physical player and hit. That's what I saw in the playoffs, was someone who was attempting to do that, attempting to play that game. So I like the pickup of Podkolzin for that reason. And we'll see what happens with Lavoie, what kind of game he brings, because he's got to show it from the moment he shows up at camp and then every other day that he's in contention for the NHL or in the NHL. And does he have that in his game? I don't know. But I think it's his only, honestly, Bruce, it's his only path to the NHL at this point.
Yeah, well, look, the consistency an issue has sort of appeared on every scouting report I've seen on Raph Lavoie from his draft day. And one of the reasons that he was considered a first-round talent but fell into the second round, where the Oilers got him 38th overall. And Ira Cooper, original Posar, who's been helping us a lot with this prospect series, and in my own reports on the AHL guys, I've leaned on him a little bit to provide an eyewitness account, because he watches those guys way more than I do. And this is what he said. When Lavoie cleared waivers and started the season in Baco, he played the best hockey of his pro career. He was bullying the AHL for a handful of games. He was a force on the boards, winning battles, taking the puck hard to the net, scoring goals. He earned his call-up. I don't think he ever found that same game upon his return after the 6 games and no points. Don't get me wrong, he's a very good AHL player and his shot is a weapon, but he never found that bullying the opponent form. So he earned his call up, and then it didn't go well, and it seemed like it affected, his confidence, his performance, what have you, or at least that's Ira's observation of what took place. And he did a lot of damage on the power play, but less so at 5-on-5 last year, which he won't be playing much power play in Edmonton. So he's got to find, as you say, that, every game, let's go in there and, make something happen. And my own observations of the player over the years is that he has games where he looks really good, and then other games where you barely notice the guy. And so that's the bridge he's got to cross.
Next on our list in the countdown is Roby Jarventie, who is a Finnish hockey winger, number 6 on our list. And he was taken in the 33rd overall in the 2020 draft by Ottawa. And after he was drafted, he had a really good season in the top league in Finland, and went over to the AHL. he had an okay first season, 33 points in 70 games in his first year in the AHL. I think he was still 19 when he started that season. Then came more success in his last 2 years. In his last 2 years, in 62 games, he's got 25 goals and 50 points. That's pretty good. That's like Raphael Lavoie, like level scoring, and he's a couple years younger than Lavoie. So, but Bruce, the last 2 years he's been plagued with knee injuries, and it limited him in 2022-23 to 40 games. And last year he had 20 points in 22 games. He also played 7 games with 1 assist, kind of like Lavoie-like numbers in Ottawa. But he had 20 points in 22 games in Belleville, but then they shut down his season, and because of a knee issue, and he had surgery on his knee. So you can see why, in terms of making that trade for Xavier Bourgault, they're thinking they've had a good look at Roby Jarventie in Ottawa, and they just thought his game combined with his injury history, it's time to move on from him. So his game is that he is a very interesting player. He's but I'll just the most recent review of him comes from Corey Pronman of The Athletic. He and Wheeler, by the way, just do excellent work.
Do they ever?
And I'm really grateful for the updates they provide on all these prospects. Stephen Ellis of the Daily Faceoff is doing the same work, and it's just a really valuable resource for anyone who's a hockey fan. So Pronman wrote, this was after his 30 points in 40 games. He said, Jarventie is a difficult evaluation. You love what he can do with the puck on his stick. He's got a ton of natural skill and creativity. He also has a great shot and can pick corners from distance. Jarventie's compete level can be quite inconsistent, though, and he plays way too much on the perimeter. His skating is also just okay. Man, he sounds like a Finnish version of Raphael Lavoie in a lot of ways, just from what I'm reading. So he's going to take some time. He's got 1 year left on his ELC. We don't know the extent of the surgery, how major the surgery was, that kind of thing, or how he's recuperating, or how ready he is going to be. But players can take a while, as we saw from Connor Brown, to come back from surgeries. He's a big guy, 6'2", 214. So there's a lot to like from him. And Stephen Ellis from the Daily Faceoff says, from a skill perspective, Bourgault is a better prospect than Jarventie. But from an NHL viewpoint, I think Jarventie is going to have a better shot at making it work out. From my viewings, I love how hard Jarventie works for the puck, how well he anticipates plays, and how he uses his frame to win battles. So it looks like on the attack, this is a really strong player. He's going to have a hard time making it, though, in the top 6 with the Oilers. And he's going to have to be a physical player, like a checker, I think, in order to make the Oilers. And does he have that in his game? We'll see.
Yep. He's already, below, for instance, Vasily Podkolzin on that checklist.
Yeah.
In terms of, they're going to be, in theory, fighting for the same job down the road. And, he's got to get over that knee injury first. I mean, the bright side is he scored the same 20 points in 22 games that Xavier Bourgault scored in 55 games for Bakersfield, and what was a truly disappointing season. Sophomore season for Bourgault, where you expect a big step forward, and he didn't even spin his wheels. He took a significant step backwards, at least offensively he did, and it just never really seemed to come together for him at all. So it's the old second opinion deal. I mean, in some ways, this is Dmitry Samorukov for Klim Kostin kind of trade, right? Where they're saying, well, their first test they didn't entirely pass it, so let's give them a look and a change of scenery.
Bruce, number 5 on the countdown is Noah Philp.
Okay.
who was off last year for personal issues. He took a year off, and apparently, rumor has it, is in incredible physical shape coming back.
Let's hope.
And Ira Cooper wrote our profile, so I'm just going to read what Ira said because I really like the way he started his profile. Ira writes, quote, "At the end of the 21-22 season, I had never heard of Noah Philp. If I were asked who my favorite prospect was at the end of the 2022-23 season, without hesitation, I would have named Noah Philp. The progression that Philp showed during the course of that season was phenomenal. Philp was playing the AHL in his first season after playing for the Golden Bears and in the Western Hockey League. Continuing with Ira, he started the season as a fourth-line winger and sometimes as a healthy scratch. He finished the season as one of Coach Colin Chalk's most relied-on forwards, a player he trusted on the PK for important defensive zone faceoffs and in all high-leverage situations, even deploying him as the number one center at times. Philp earned the trust of the coaching staff by playing fantastic two-way hockey and turned himself into a real prospect. So he just turned 27 or
26.
26.
Yeah.
And essentially what Ira and other people are arguing is he could come in and he's a bigger version of Derek Ryan. Brings a lot of the same smarts, attributes, high hockey IQ, hardworking, sound defensively. And boy, Bruce, the Oilers need this kind of player to come back into the organization. He might have challenged last year for a job, and I think
absolutely. I'm sure he would have got the call over James Hamblin, who played 31 games for the Oilers last year when there was injuries and before they started fleshing out the roster, signing Corey Perry and so on, that eventually greased the skids for Hamblin to go back down. I'm sure Philp would have got that call instead. I'm almost 100% sure. Nothing against Hamblin, but Philp was closer to what they needed at that particular time.
So it'll be really interesting to see. And with the loss of Holloway, to me, Philp, as a third or fourth line center on the Oilers is not any kind of long shot at all by the end of the year. I think we could see that, and it could come right just at the right moment. And if you have this kind of really smart and effective defensive hockey player, it's interesting because it's players like Jarventie and Lavoie. Like Philp's never been the scorer in junior hockey or in the AHL even. That these guys were, but he's just got that defensive smarts that makes such a huge difference in becoming a professional, becoming an NHLer. Bruce, next on our list. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that he's the one guy who technically shouldn't be on our list because he's not eligible for the Calder Trophy this year. He turns 26 2 weeks before the deadline, so he'll be too old to be considered an NHL rookie. But we made the exception because of a very significant change in status of this player. We last made the exception for Vincent Desharnais when he signed an NHL class contract, and we thought, well, we should discuss this guy in terms of being a prospect, even though he's an older one, and he in fact made the NHL. And same thing applies here, that Philp's back in the mix. He's very much, in the prospect pool, even as, it's more, our guidelines aren't appropriate to this player as opposed to he shouldn't be on the list. He should be, and we put him there, and he's number 5.
Did he sign a 1 or 2 year deal here?
1 year. And he would be UFA at the end of it.
Yeah, he would be.
Understanding.
Yeah, so again, if he does make it, you're going to want to sign him right away. Like this is going to be whoever makes it.
Actually, he'll still be 26, so I guess they do. We'll have RFA.
Group 2 though.
No, I don't think so. But don't quote me. I don't think so.
I'm just going to check if there's any notion of that on RFA. It says.
Okay, he's still 26 on June 30th. That's fine.
Arbitration eligible. Yeah, his birthday's in August.
Yeah, end of August.
So the Oilers, he's not Group 2. That's good
Correct.
news. Okay. Ira will correct us if we're wrong. uh, Next on the list, Bruce, is a player that you wrote about, Maximus, the fantastically named. I'm sure he was born after the movie Gladiator came out. Maximus Wanner.
Yeah. Diamond in the rough, I call him. Another 7th-round pick that the Oilers found on the blue line. This in the tradition of John Marino and Vincent DeHarnay and Mike Kesselring, who are all 6th or 7th-round picks. For whatever reason, in 19 and 20, the Oilers picked basically all forwards. I picked Philp Broberg, and then they picked nothing but forwards for 2 years. In 21, they went back to the well in terms of kind of finding a big, under the radar right shot defenseman in the 7th round in Wanner, and this was the year of the pandemic, and so he barely played. In fact, he'd only played 22 games in the WHL. He played 5 games as a 16, 17-year-old, and then only 17 games in that shortened season. And so the Oilers had some kind of inside track. I think somebody in the organization knew somebody who knew someone who said, this might be a good player. And anyway, 7th-round pick. I mean, why not? And he went from sort of an extra player on Moose Jaw Warriors to be a strong player in his 18-year-old season, and then a very, very good player in his 19-year-old season, where he even picked it up offensively as well. You know, he was 30 points in 44 games, plus 23, and then 7 points in 10 playoff games, plus 6, you know, so not just scoring decent numbers, but outscoring. And from there, he went right into the pro ranks as a 20-year-old rookie in the AHL. And usually those guys in their transition years, you look at our rankings of players, you know, where our own list where we show this is where they were in the past. And almost always the year the guy goes from graduating junior to rookie pro, his ranking drops because he has trouble making that transition. It is a tough transition. And Wanner made it, and he passed that test, I think, with flying colors as an AHL rookie. He played all 68 games. He didn't just make the team, but he made the team as an every game regular. He may have started at third pairing, but he was playing with Cam Dineen for much of the year. They were a strong pairing. He had, without playing hardly anything at all on the power play, 7 goals, which was top 10 AHL rookies for a defenseman. 10 assists, 17 points, plus 13, which tied Phil Kemp for the team lead and was also in the top 10 in the AHL for a rookie defenseman. And, you know, he's raw. I think Ira mentioned that Keith Gretzky used the word raw about 5 different times when he was interviewed about this guy. And it's not like he's going to come into training camp and make the Oilers, but he's only entering his 2nd year of his 3-year ELC, and he is way ahead of the curve already at this point, and he may be here a little sooner than later. And I mean, last year you wrote expectations for 23-24, taking a regular shift in Bakersfield, check, and a regular turn on the penalty kill, check. Why did that skip? Getting a handful of points, check, and holding his own team plus minus tops on the team, check. Stepping up as season goes along, starting to dominate on defense with his physical edge and maybe busting into the top 4 by the last stretch. I mean, he checked every single one of those boxes. And, as a very impressive rookie season. And our friend Bruce Kurlock, who writes for Oilers Nation, he wrote a report that I found encouragingly similar to the one that I did. But he, of course, does video breakdowns and shows some of the, picked out some nice examples of the way that the guy plays, and he does have a nice edge. And as I wrote, he needs to file off some of the edge, but not all of it, because I kind of like edgy defensemen. And Ira compared him to young Jason Smith, which, I approve this message.
Yeah, that'd be good. He's a right shot, correct?
Yes, he is. Big,
huge.
rangy, big. Well, he's pretty huge himself. He's listed as where are you? 6'4", 6'4", 2. No, I got the wrong Max. Sorry, that's Beryozkin. I just saw Max on
6'3", 220, something like that.
Yeah, he's a big fella.
Yeah. Well, when you read my expectations for the season, Matt, I was pretty optimistic about the guy. But he had a really good major junior season in his final year, and he had those attributes. And again, I harp on this with the AHL players, like how they've got to have that physical edge if they're going to. It really helps if they're going to make it in the NHL. And it's because like often the super skilled guys in the NHL, they skip right over the AHL. And everyone else, you will find some, like maybe a fifth of the guys in the top 50 scorers in the NHL do have AHL experience.
Mm-hmm.
But they also tend to be more guys who are a bit more physical. And it's just, that's what you have to have. You're going to be working your way up from the bottom line to the top line, generally speaking, if you're an AHLer. And Wanner has that possibility to get that chance to be a third pairing NHL D-man. Maybe like Desharnais, Desharnais this year had a chance to make the top four on the Oilers. He was paired with Nurse on a couple different occasions, and he didn't make that jump. But maybe this year in Vancouver he will. Maybe he'll find that. So Wanner's going to be a while. We're not going to see him in the NHL, I don't think. I think we'll probably see 3 full AHL seasons out of him. And then we'll see, can he make that? Can he make the jump to third pairing in the NHL? Will he get that job done? And then will someone offer sheet him and we'll lose him and be despondent as all hell? And
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Oh, he's young.
Yeah, just kidding. I'm sure he'll pick Edmonton over the offer sheet. Bruce, we are now at Beau Akey, number 3 in the countdown. And last year when I wrote about him, I remarked on how rare it was for the Oilers to draft this kind of player, a smaller offensive D-man. They hardly ever draft this player. I don't know if they draft them more in the other organizations, but they sure don't draft them in Edmonton very much. In all the years of drafting, I think there was like 6 comparable guys, smaller D-men who had been drafted. And one of them, Ethan Bear, who really was pretty husky. Like he was not tall, but he was thick, Ethan Bear.
Right. Yeah.
He made it. I don't think any of the others had. So I was looking, I was just trying to think with the Oilers, how often we'd seen this kind of player break in with the Oilers and succeed with the Oilers. And it turned out that there was actually a number of examples of smaller defensemen who have done very well with the Edmonton Oilers, put up significant points per game. But interestingly, none of them, and some of them had long NHL careers, but none of them, not one of them, had a long career with the Oilers. Right. Now, long careers with the Oilers aren't that common on defense. Like there's only about, I think 40 players, 40 D-men in franchise history who have played 4 or more years with the Oilers. But so I found 8 players so Beau Akey is a smaller player. He is 6 feet tall, about 185. So he's not tiny, but he is a smaller player who has outstanding skating skills, great puck moving skills, some questions on defense. He was taken late in the second round last year in the draft. So he came to camp. He played well in the rookie tournament. He got one exhibition game, and you guys saw him pretty good. He looked pretty good, and then he earned a entry-level contract in early October because of that, but he broke his nose, and then he hurt his shoulder, and he had shoulder surgery in November. So it was a tough year in that regard. He only played 14 games in the OHL. In terms of the Oilers, like the comparable players, there's Reijo Ruotsalainen and Risto Siltanen from the glory year Oilers, and they were both outstanding hockey players. Ruotsalainen, he only played a handful of games with the Oilers, except in the playoffs where he played 2 full playoff seasons and won 2 Stanley Cups, but he averaged 0.81 points per game. Siltanen, 0.73 points per game. He's the only one in this group, though, who played more than 200 games with the Oilers, and he only played about 206, I think it was. Yeah. Tyson Barrie, 0.69 points per game. Ilya Biakin, 0.64 points per game. Norm McIver, 0.59 points per game. Lubomir Vishnowsky, 0.59 points per game. Greg Hoggood, 0.58. And Marc-Andre Bergeron, 0.47. This is an interesting list of players. They all had their moments, obviously, in Edmonton, putting up points. But the Oilers didn't. It's funny, like, and some of them have had long NHL careers, but Edmonton just seems to get these guys and move them out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like, I wish they had kept Normie McIver, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. They lost him in the expansion draft to Ottawa, I think, but he was the guy for Dave Manson, who was when he was with the Oilers. He had a reputation of being a bit of a wild man, but when they put him and McIver together in the back half of that 91-92 season, they were great, and McIver was a big part of it. And then they let that guy go, and that was that's my cat speed bagging the door. She wants to get in here. And anyways, they let McIver go, and to my chagrin at the time, then and now, I think they should get the ghost of Norm McIver to be Darnell Nurse's partner right now, if they can find that guy. But as you say, they just the Oilers don't seem to have. I mean, Greg Hoggood, he played parts of 2 years here. He played 49 games and got 31 points as a defenseman. Pretty good. It's over a 50-point pace, and yet they moved on from him, and they don't like defensemen. That it seems like we got a little defenseman. The question is, well, how is he going to be able to handle Bob Probert in the slot? And the obvious answer is the same way other defensemen handle Bob Probert in the slot. They can't. But yet, if it's a little guy, it's like he's got this, 2 strikes against him before he starts. And the Oilers long have not liked to hang on to players like that.
Yeah. So with Akey, Beau Akey, people rave about his skating, Bruce. Here we have Scott Wheeler from The Athletic. He says, quote, Akey is a beautiful flowing skater with plus level mobility in all 4 directions. I like him defending the rush, where he uses his feet, stick to manage gaps, steer opposing carriers. His game defensively does lack a little polish and attention to detail at times. And unquote. Brock Otten of OHL Prospects. There's some questions about his defending, Bruce, but Brock Otten says those kinds of things can be fixed with a young player. He reminds him, like, the best case is a player like TJ Brody, who played so well in Calgary for so long. And he is a right shot defenseman as well, so there's opportunity in that regard. What did you think of him?
Yeah, well, I was looking at our list and thinking, how the heck did this guy jump from number 9 to number 3 in our ratings when he only played 14 games last year? And it just all goes back to how he played at training camp and rookie camp. He just looks so good. Like his skating was just all world. Like, he has the old 4-directional skating, make space for himself, look up, make the pass. And like a 18-year-old Norm McIver. So there's lots to like in his game. In retrospect, I probably personally would have ranked Wanner ahead of him in terms of subsequent research we've done since we did the actual rankings. But I do like the player, and the question is, how does he bounce back from this surgery? He missed the Barry's first exhibition game, and there's some concern that they're still kind of not quite 100%. I'll be interested to see. Rookie Kemp's coming right up. Does he play? Does he play in the games? Hopefully, yes. And so I haven't heard specifics as to why he missed that exhibition game, and it's probably very possibly because he's slated for Edmonton and then coming back to Barrie. But getting over that shoulder and getting back into scheme of things, he should be a very, very good player on that team this year if he's 100%.
The injury did happen early on, so like he's had more. Like he didn't have surgery at the end of the year, for instance. He had it in November, or like mid-November. So we'll see. Nugent Hopkins had that surgery. It's just different. It's different with every single player, different with every single injury. So we'll see. I didn't see him last year, play those games. But I was away last year. So we have we're at number 3. There's the top 2 forward prospects coming up in the countdown, and then we're going to go right into the Penticton tournament, Bruce. And I'm not expecting any major news except perhaps a PTO this week. They seem a little hesitant again to do it because they have all these other players that they've kind of made commitments to and deserve a shot at making the team. So, but things have changed since then. Broberg's out, so it wouldn't be. He would have presumably had a spot locked up. So if they brought someone in on a PTO, it wouldn't be that outrageous in my view. I just wonder if they think there's anyone worth trying with, if it's even worth their time to do it or not. That seems to be where they're at, or maybe players want contracts or something more than that. I don't know, but I think Tyson Barrie was wise to go to Calgary. And try there. He'll have a much better chance of making the team, getting a contract there than he would in Edmonton. So, any final thoughts?
Well, I think we've pretty much covered the waterfront. We'll be doing another podcast a little bit later this week, looking at the last couple and looking ahead to actual hockey being played starting Friday in Penticton, when the Oilers, as is traditional, open against Vancouver on the Friday night, and then play Calgary on the Saturday night. Might as well get right into it.
All righty, Bruce. Thanks for talking today.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult Hockey Podcast.